OTT video platforms are finding favor beyond the metros, and the growth rate is expected to outpace that of urban users in the coming years. OTT platforms have noticed this trend and are ramping up on non English content offerings for the Bharat consumers. Can OTT really become the media for Bharat in the long term? We'll get an answer to this in our upcoming fireside chat on the new Bharat media. I would like to invite Anirban Choudhury, Manager Content and Partnerships, ETBrandEquity, to lead the conversation with Mr. Karan Bedi, CEO, MX Media. Over to you, gentlemen.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying with us. Welcome to another session of Brand Bharat Summit. For all those who are joining us from the north, I know it is piercing cold, but trust me, this is a session of pivotal significance. Here is a global brand that rose to popularity in India, tapping into Bharat, and then got acquired by a Bharatiya company. Today, it is definitely one of the largest OTT players in the country. If I go by the latest number, here is a platform with 280 million monthly active users, and the main custodian of serving this 280 million monthly active users, Mr. Karan Bedi. Welcome to Brand Bharat Summit 2020.
Thank you, Anirban. That's very kind of you.
So first and foremost, how will you explain this Bharat Consumer for our viewers today? What does this consumer mean, and is it completely different to the set that we see from metros or India that we call?
So I think, firstly, I think it's a continuum. I think that, there is this in recent times, we have been, talking about this India versus Bharat kind of phenomenon quite a bit. And actually, I don't think India versus Bharat or India and Bharat is two very distinct groups. I think it is more a continuum of, India on one end and Bharat on the other end, and, lots of stuff in between. And it just kind of, think of it like a gradient rather than a black and white kind of scenario. So I think it would be remiss to say, it's very different or the same. But coming to that, I think what has happened in the last 3-4 years is MX obviously is a great representation of that. But I think you've seen a lot of Indian products emerge that have been built for Indian audiences rather than simply been transplanted from foreign audiences to India. And with MX, I think the 2 or 3 things that we got right in a great way. One was obviously technology, right? Our app size is small. Our crash rate is very, very low for devices that are not the highest end devices.
Correct.
Our video compression technology is class leading. We have the best video compression technology in the world to make sure that the data usage for streaming is not too much. So on the tech side, that's what we got right. On the content side, again, what has happened with a lot of foreign players is that there's a set of content that they came in with.
Correct.
And they kind of added on to that content around, but it's not been thought of ground up from a clean green slate about what is it that the consumer that in front of us wants, and therefore what is it that we need to give them. So I think that's another advantage that we had, that we were able to think from a clean slate, not just from the perspective of transplanting foreign content to India, but also within India. Television being I think again it's hard to say if television is an India or a Bharat phenomenon, but it's a phenomenon that certainly did not penetrate to the depth of where smartphones have penetrated in terms of individuals. So there's a lot of difference in how we've done things. But I think in general you'll see that whether it's the language of consumption, whether it is the pace of stories, whether it is the kind of product and the introductions to products, the kind of product features that we build. So these are all very specific to the audiences we want to serve.
Correct.
And these audiences lie in both the metros of India as well as well beyond the metros, tier 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Correct, exactly. When you have like 280 million monthly active users, is definitely spread across regions. But any particular insights that you have observed on which regions interact more with what kind of content? Is it that the music play a bigger role, say, in getting the Punjabis on board, or is it, or you don't think that way?
No, there are definitely insights and nuances that play out across different audiences. I'll give you an example.
Mm,
For example, I think in general, Marathi audiences prefer slightly more nuanced, drama, thriller, serious sort of cinema,
correct.
or sort of shows, which translates across both the cinema as well as the OTT platforms. I
Mm,
think that definitely there is a bias towards more action and hero oriented stories for markets like Andhra and Telangana
mhm,
in the Telugu market. So I
correct.
think those kinds of sort of larger preferences do emerge. But I think, look, in the end, OTT is unique, right? You don't have to think about an audience as a whole. You think about it as individuals, and you have
Mm,
to think about stories that resonate with the large enough set of individuals in a market, and
correct.
that's what we've done.
Correct. That's great. And you mentioned about television. I mean, yeah, it's true. Just 20 crore households we say have television. That's the back number that we have. And one reason why that happened was because of the lack of electricity and electrification. That is getting improved. But there is another parallel discussion to OTT in that context, and that comes with payments. So do you feel there is an issue with payments as you go deeper into India?
So number one, I'd like to state that our primary business model is ads. We do have
Correct.
MX Go, which is an ad-free option that users can take. So in
Correct.
general, our view on paid products is interesting, right? I mean, we don't think that the traditional pay for access to content model will work in India. I mean, we've seen many large companies try it, and it goes beyond a point. Right? I mean, it doesn't go beyond a point. It
Correct.
there are certain people who are willing to pay. Of course, there's a different dynamic when you're talking about live sports and you're talking about other things, but the astronomical cost of acquiring those things is a balancing factor to that. But I
Correct.
think what the broad sense that we have is actually from an infrastructure perspective, it's not so bad at all now, right?
Okay.
You've got UPI rollout, which I mean, I have to give credit where credit is due. I think National Payments Corporation of India, spurred on by the government and the banks,
Yeah.
as it is. You guys know this, right? This is not news to anybody. UPI has
Correct.
truly changed. So I think whether you want to make a 2 rupee transaction, a 5 rupee transaction, or 500 rupee transaction,
Hmm.
it's pretty seamless. Now, of course, you're right. There is still an audience. I think the tragedy of the India market is such that we talk about these 500 million, 600 million smartphones.
Hmm.
The if you look at the flip side of it, that means that 900 people, 800 million people without a smartphone.
Correct.
I think that's so. When you talk about going to that point, yes, you're right. So if you
Hmm.
don't have a smartphone, you're not likely to be forget being able to use any of this content, right? Even if you could somehow get access to it, you don't have access to UPI,
Correct.
and don't have the ability to pay. So I think that's the sort of thought process you have to think about. But I think within the smartphone ecosystem, which is of course extremely large, I
Hmm.
think that problem is. I don't want to use the word problem is solved, but I think the problem has been pretty well tackled.
That's a great positive sign. I mean, tackling that critical problem pretty well. You mentioned about the people that do not have the smartphones, and that's where many across the globe, competitors, international competitors, they do see as an opportunity. When that set come into the fold, will the relevance of regional content grow even further?
Yes, 100%. The relevance of regional content is very high even now. And I think
Hmm.
even content, right? For example, we are one of the few markets in the world where even though our film sector and our TV sector has been completely open to all
Correct.
kinds of content, and without any restriction, right? Any movie can be released in India as long as it has a census certificate, which pretty much anybody can go and get
Yeah.
within the framework of the censor law. The fact is that only less than 10% of the box office is driven by English language content,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
And now there's a large emerging chunk of content that is English language originally, but dubbed in Hindi and other regional languages. But overall, when you think about it, the consumption pattern in India has always been Hindi and regional.
Correct.
And I think with OTT is going to evolve slightly different from television, because in television there was a question of saying, okay, you want a Hindi channel, now you want to start a separate channel for regional, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to do that in OTT. We have like content in about 10 or 12 languages in India. We make content in about 6 or 7 languages. We dub content in 10 languages,
Correct.
and I think that is going that as dubbing technology gets more automated, you're probably going to have it in 50 languages
Yeah.
soon. But yeah, regional content and content in people's sort of most comfortable language is something that's a big emerging factor, and will continue to be for the next many years.
Correct.
Even with the years, forget the next 800 million.
And you mentioned about the television challenge where they had to actually start a new channel to segment it further into a particular language. But you do have a challenge, right? I mean, like for one of your shows, which are my favorite, Queen, was the marketing plan different from what you would say a marketing plan for a Ek Thi Begum would be, which is morely a Hindi Marathi show, or your Samantar, for that example, another Marathi show. So is it different when you go say target a different audience, go deeper?
So interesting fact, Queen actually did more numbers in UP than it did in any other state. And it did very well in Tamil Nadu. Obviously, as you can imagine, it's originally a Tamil show about a character and context that is from Tamil Nadu. And it is done, it did extremely well there, but the number in UP was higher, dubbed in Hindi. And if you took up the overall Hindi number, then though it was way higher than Tamil. Because the number of obviously Hindi speakers and other language speakers are much higher than just the total number of Tamil speakers in India. So
Correct.
I think that there's a huge upside in being able to go to different languages. But yes, the primary language of a show obviously determines its strategy in terms of how you market it, how you pitch it to a particular consumer, what kind of different audiences have different expectations of what their content is like. So yeah, of course, but that's a tactical marketing strategy. Strategically, we think that good content will appeal to anybody.
Correct. And this insight that you just shared with me, that Queen did phenomenally well in UP. Does that mean you will tomorrow go and actually promote a Queen kind of a show in UP as well?
We did. We absolutely did. There was absolute promotion, and obviously, the maximum amount of promotion that we do channel wise, obviously, is on digital. Right?
Correct.
We do, but even on non-digital media, we went out. I mean, UP was properly marketed to, and the sequel of Queen is under development right now. It's under production actually, and that will also be marketed to
the Hindi heartland.
Every state as it comes.
Great. Tamil show successful in the Hindi heartland. I mean, that's the Bharat we talk about. We are at the last phase of our discussion, and I have a couple of more questions. Can you highlight the challenges that you face when you talk about going deeper into India in today's context?
I would say the biggest challenge is, like I said, it's familiarity with smartphone usage and content. So that is going away quite quickly. I think the next big challenge is data, right? We are literally competing with time. So the question that really comes into our minds is, okay, a customer wants to watch X amount of video in his day or her day, and the limiting factor is how much data they have. And even after the data revolution in India, where we have 1.5 GB per day available for pretty much very low price, the fact is it's still 1.5 GB. Now 1.5 GB translates, it goes very quickly when you think about it, right? If you take into account, okay, fine, there'll be certain amount of social media usage, certain amount of chatting, etc., certain amount of non-entertainment usage, then you're left with X amount of MB in a day, and that has to translate to how many hours of video you can watch. Which is why one of the things I mentioned to you earlier on in the conversation, we focus so much of our time in getting our video compression to be in class so that we can maximize that. But I think that is, famously, Netflix used to say our biggest competitor is sleep.
Yeah.
I would say in India, I would say our biggest competitor is lack of data. I think the more that we are able to, get that into the hands of consumers, I think that there is a almost unlimited demand for growth for entertainment in India.
Great. My last question to you, Karan, before I let you go. Thank you very much for your time. Where is the Bharat consumer headed in terms of media consumption in the coming years? And how do you see brands trying to capitalize on that trend?
I think one really big thing that's going to happen is that, again, when we talk about the 20 crore TV households and, one TV per household effectively, right? 1.1, I think is the number. You actually are not, and we have this thing in our mind of saying, okay, multiply by 4.5 for this family size. I mean, that's not really true. I mean, there are not 900 million TV consumers in India. Maybe if you can't anyone who's ever watched TV, once in 3 months or once in a year, sure. But otherwise, on a regular basis, I mean, I know that TV doesn't have a DAU, MAU concept, but if you were to translate it to DAU, I don't think it's going to be near 900 million. But what I think is interesting is because, the internet in general and in particular now with OTT, the really interesting thing that's happened is that loads of new consumers have come into the mix.
Yes.
And therefore, there is a way for brands to get to these consumers, right? What that means is not just newer consumers are available for brands, but newer brands are starting to come onto these platforms. So there is a lot of up and down. There's a lot of sort of, I would say, new emergence of new brands that never traditionally had access to consumers on print or television because it's untargetable. And those people, think about a car dealership.
Yeah.
Right. Their only thing was that there was a huge amount of capital required to get to these users. Car dealership would go to a newspaper and put this much of a car and these many dealerships underneath it. No dealership themselves would be able to put that out. A car dealership can be an advertiser on MX or on many other digital platforms.
Correct. And it is also brand safe environment, right? I mean, the one thing that worried brands for so long is having a digital interface that brand safe.
I think we work very closely with our agencies and clients to work through that context, and I think anybody can go and check anything they want now. It's a brand safe environment, and we are very clear about what those parameters are with our clients.
Correct. Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Not at all. Thank you.
Yes, and it's been some time we have not spoken, but thank you for your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Bedi and Anirban, for such an informative conversation. A lot to learn and implement from your inputs. My request to the audience to take this conversation to the vast group of people using social media as a medium. And don't forget to use the hashtag ETBrandBharat. Stay tuned for the next session.